Hi guys, welcome back to Crafting with Kelly. Today we are going to do our third lesson of our virtual pop-up book workshop. So today's lesson will be bump out. First, let's start with a story and then we'll talk about what a bump out is and how to do it. So the story is called The Early Bird and the Worm. So Homer was an early bird. He woke up every morning at the crack of dawn, and by mid-morning he was full of seeds and looking for a little conversation. Hilda was a worm. She was not fond of birds, and she wasn't interested in conversation. Homer tried to talk to Hilda, but she did what worms always do when they saw him. She ran, or actually slithered very quickly. Homer followed her home, still trying to talk. And this is a flap, which we learned last week. There's Hilda diving into her house. Homer was a persistent bird, though. He stuck his beak into Hilda's tunnel and shouted. Hilda had to stop watching the young and the squirmy because he was so loud. But interesting, very interesting. Hilda was intrigued. She even turned off the TV. This one is actually a page that does not have any pop-ups whatsoever. I think I had not enough pieces for a story and I had to tie it together, so I just made a blank page. And here is our first bump out. There are two in this book. Homer visited Hilda's tunnel every morning. Finally, she was brave enough to come out and talk to him face to face. Homer stayed far away to make sure that Hilda was not uncomfortable. So you can see a bump out gives your story some depth. So here's Hilda way back here in her little worm thing, and there's a big bush outside, and Homer's sitting on top. And here's our second bump out. Eventually, they became bored with shouting, and Homer came to sit beside Hilda's tunnel. So you can see the skies behind them, and it just looks more interesting. After that, they got together every day for seeds and gravel. Soon they learned that, although they didn't have much in common, they had become friends. And again, this page has no pop out or bump out or anything. Homer and Hilda, bird and worm, best friends. And that's the end. So we had two bump outs in this book, and bump outs, like I said, give a story a little bit of depth and interest when you're looking at something. And it also can make something seem closer to the story and something else seem further away, or vice versa. Kids have done in the past, so you can see. This is a very fancy one. It's got a triple bump out, and then somebody also stuck the castle front to part of the bump out. So it's a flying castle. If you look, you can see bump outs have a square behind them. Here is, here's a double bump out. There's two buildings, and again, somebody did this one with layers. But bump outs can be simple too, like the ones in Homer and Hilda's story. Now there's two on this page. There's a dog and a cat laying in beds. But you could have just one too. Here's just a walrus, and he's looking closer than the iceberg behind him in the sky. So here's one, it's a double one, but only in two places. So there's two bump outs. Looks like it's from a story that we might all know. I see Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and a lion. So bump outs can be more fancy, but let's do the basic one first. Here's a birthday cake. And then this one is a stove. So what you want to do is take your card, fold it in half, and a bump out is a lot like a talking mouth, except you need two lines. So you could either draw the lines you're gonna make, like so, make sure it's on the fold, because you can't, if you cut it on the not fold, it won't do anything. And you're going to just cut them out. Now, for a basic bump out, you need it to stop at the same place. So then we're gonna take that card and fold it one way, and turn that fold over and fold it the other way. Then make your tent in front of you and use your thumbnails to push the bump out in. Then you're gonna fold it again and make it nice and crisp. So here is a bump out. Now, what we do with bump outs, depending on what you're happening in your story, is that you might want to draw something to stick on the front. Just gonna use this one that I had. You could just cut out this frog and cut him out like better than this and stick it on the front, and then draw a big background. And again, the one thing you have to remember is that your character that you're gonna put on the front of the bump out has to stay inside the book. So that would not work. He'd have to either be shorter, or I have to make him a little bit smaller. Now, you saw some of the fancy bump outs, right? So to do a fancy bump out, what you wanna do is, see, here's your fold that you just did on the inside of the card. So you could draw two more short lines, or shorter lines, like so. And you're only gonna cut one side of the card. So you go in between the folds and you cut. Sometimes you have to use the ends of the scissors, so. And so I cut those two lines, and then you fold those this way. And it's a little bit harder sometimes to fold inside, but you can do it. So you fold it that way, and then you bump that bump out. And so that makes a double fold. Sometimes that gives you an idea for your story, or it could also, so you could put like a plant up here, and then something smaller down here. Or you could do whatever you want. So here is one of those bump outs. That is the birthday cake. Now, I'll show you from the inside. If you look at this, somebody actually tried to do another layer with this one, but it got so unwieldy that they just flattened that back out, because you can't keep going because it will get very, very flimsy. Two bump outs on one page is something that I use quite a bit. And the good thing to remember about this is it makes characters have different levels of where they are in your story. So it does make it much more visually interesting. So just as an example, I'm going to cut out two bump outs using these lines. So that's cut. I'm going to fold them at the same time because it's easier. Sorry for the shaky table. So fold it back one way, fold it back the other way, make it into a tent, and push it in with your thumb. So here we have two bump outs. And like I said, that gives you, like, if you look at the pages, one is much further out front than the other. So this could be a big character and a small character, or a character that's right in front of you versus something that's far away. I tend to use this kind of a bump out the most in my stories, but there's other kinds you can use. So let's look at some of the bump outs we've had in the stories we have seen already. In the Baby Blues, the bump out was Checkers standing in front of the crib. And again, it gives you a nice sense of proportion because the crib is here on the back and the dog is in the front. So it makes it look like there's some depth there. In this one, Lost from last week, we've got the bunny and the skunk, and you can see the skunk is further away standing on a log and the bunny's in the foreground coming out of his hole. There's some, let's see, this one again is just two characters kind of looking at each other. And you'll notice that the background of the bump is colored the same as the background of the page so that makes it blend into that background, and the same with the little donkey. So here's a bump out from this story. It's a nest with some eggs in it. Let's see, and something very strange, it's two groups of trick-or-treaters. So it just makes it look like they're moving because one group is way up here and then the next group is back in the background. And then there's the tree and the moon and everything that look further away. Bump outs can also have, this isn't done very often, but it's a possibility. Here's a bump out that's like a table, and on top of it, there's a flap. So there's a suitcase with bananas in it. So let's do some fancier bump outs, because this is another bump out. But what is different about this one? It's not a flat bump out. It's at an angle, so it actually looks like a snowplow. And in this one, it's done at an angle, so it looks like a book. So here are some of the fancier bump outs that I had mentioned. Now I don't think these actually are drawn in. Well, maybe they are. This one was done with actually some fun scissors. So it could be a cloud, it could be something different. I think the person who did this one didn't want to use it, so maybe it's not the best idea. This one is a dresser, but the person who did it actually curved the bump outs a little bit. So if you look at it from this side, you can see it's not a straight line, it's kind of a curved line. And then they did the same with the second layer. You can see it was supposed to be a dresser. This is the book one. So instead of having it two flat lines, they're two parallel lines. Here's another castle. And this one's interesting because the turret is going to be on the back, but that leaves you two levels of castle to work with. This one is another birthday cake. Somebody did the curved lines instead of the straight lines. Now here's one. I'm not sure where this person was going with this, but they did do both sides. So I'm not sure what that could be. It could be two like steps or something. It could, you could think of something. Here's another one that's kind of like the book, but the lines aren't parallel. So it's more of a, I don't know. It recedes into the background a little bit better. And here's one more like the snowplow, where it was flat on the top and curved on the, and angled more on the bottom. So I guess you can do it that way. That looks like it could be a, I don't know, plane going up. So let's experiment with a few more bump outs. So we know that the basic bump out is two parallel lines that end around the same place, and you fold them one way, you fold them the other way, and then you bump it out. And that's the basic bump out, a parallel bump out. Now, if you want to do more of a book-shaped bump out, you fold your page, and instead of doing it straight, like so, well, that's not very straight, but you're going to do it more at an angle. So, instead of doing parallel lines, you do angled lines. Then you do it the same thing. You fold it in, you fold it the other way, and then you bump it. Now this one might be a little bit too angled to be a book, because if it was going to be a book, I should have probably cut to right here. But that looks like the snowplow blade, which may be where I got that idea. So, and again, if you wanted to do this one as, I guess it could be like a crazy, I don't know, let's see, we'll do this one with, so here we're gonna do a double one on one side of this. Shall we make it the same direction or a different direction? Let's see what happens if we go this way and do the opposite direction and do a bump out going that way. So we'll fold that one way, fold it the other way, bump it in, and I'm not sure what you have. It could be a house that's kind of got a crooked chimney, I guess. It doesn't work this way really, unless you wanted to, maybe it could. Here's an idea, let's try this. If we do the other side the same way, fold it this way, fold it that way. This actually looks a little bit like a face. What if we, I'll show you what I mean. So see, the thing about the pop-up class, again, you get different ideas depending on what you draw. And what you draw can become part of your idea for whatever it is you're making as a book. So here's, maybe it's a lizard, maybe it's a knight. If we just do, so see, doesn't that look sort of like a knight? Especially when you back it with, because remember, when we finish these, we will be doing the same thing. So when you put it like this, maybe that's a dragon. It has a neck. I'll give it some scales and some horns. And that's a great dragon. And I had never done that before. And that's the nice thing about pop-ups, is sometimes you just come up with something completely different because you're experimenting. So why don't you think about what you would like for a bump out? Would you like just a plain basic bump out? A plain basic bump out? A bump out with levels? A bump out at an angle? Or something else? Get your stuff together, and I'll show you a couple more examples from other books before we get started with coloring. This one has a poodle looking at itself in the mirror, and that's actually kind of a neat one because here I drew the back of the poodle looking in the mirror, and there's nothing on the other side, but you can see his reflection, and it really does make it look like something is going on and there's some depth in that story. This one just has one bump out. Oh no, it's two. So there's a cactus and a crocodile. This one has a castle. And again, you can add pieces on to the bump outs. So this is a basic bump out. It's just one big one, a smaller one, and another one. But then the towers and the turret right here are all glued on to make it look like it's a bigger picture than it is. All right, so let's get started. You guys, while you're doing your bump outs, you should be thinking about your story. Now, as I just showed you, I have 3 very different pages, especially if I do a dragon. But what if the frog is actually a dragon in disguise? So why don't you think about the characters you have, the character you made, and we will go from there. So now that we're gonna continue the same way we do with all our other pages. So once you have your pencil sketch, you wanna outline it with black marker, and then you're gonna start coloring. And because I think I am going to have this be the frog somehow, I'm not sure how, we'll figure it out with the other pages. I'm going to use the 2 markers. Remember I said if you're gonna have a character go through, this would be a good way to show that this dragon may be the same person as the frog. The colors of the frog are written down here, and I can use those same colors for the dragon. And one more thing. You have to make sure that when you fold your page, your bump out, it doesn't go above the page. Because again, you don't want anything sticking out of your book. And this would have been a great book for my character to read, but when I close the book, it sticks out too far. So you need to make sure that you don't go any further than about this far into the page. That's about as far as you can go, so not quite halfway. So start with a simple bump out, and if that is something you want to try, then you can do that. And if it's not, then you could get more elaborate. But just remember that what is going to make your bump out work is the background needs to be all colored in, and actually the bottom needs to be like a floor or the ground, something. It works better if everything is colored. So as an example, even though this is just the grass or something, I did color it green. So it makes it look much more interesting. And the green continues in this page too. So next we have the step of deciding what you're gonna do. And let me do something with both of these. Let's see, I have my frog. I have my butterfly, I have the rabbit, and I have the cow thing. So maybe, think about this, because that's the other thing. Somehow this is all has to pull together into a book, into a single story. So you've got your work cut out for you. I'm going to outline and color some pages, and I will be back with you in a little bit and see which page, which bump out I'll be using to do my story. One technique that we mentioned in the other videos, but I just want to make sure we repeat, is when you're drawing your picture, you want to use a pencil and you want to draw it pretty lightly. And then once you're happy with your picture, you want to go over the pencil marks with a black marker. And then you can erase, if you drew lightly enough, you can erase the pencil marks you made so that what you're left with is just the black markers over what you wanted to make. Now you can see if you can guess what that is. So it makes it much easier and it makes the book look neater. It's up to you though. If you want to just use pencil and do a rough draft, that works too. So here's the bump out, the double bump out. Now you notice that it looks pretty boring. It's just grass with a path going to the bump out and sky. But here are my two little characters that are going to go on the bump out. So you're going to take your glue stick, which I finally remembered, hooray. And we're going to put this building on one bump out. We're going to glue this little character on the other bump out. And now, instead of a plain old boring sky and ground, we have a frog jumping to the library. So that's my first bump out. And since I said I would do both of them, here is the book one. So here's the frog at the library. So he's reading a book. I don't know what I'm going to have the book called yet, so I decided not to color that in yet. But we are going to finish both of these pages by doing what we do to finish off a page. So you need to take another card, fold it in half, and we'll start with this. Oops, I guess so you are going to take your rubber cement, and we'll start with a pencil. So we do not want to get rubber cement anywhere where it could glue closed your bump out. So the rubber cement is going to go outside these two squares. And you're going to put it on the back of this page and the inside of that page. Now, bump outs, usually you don't really need anything behind it. But if you wanted to make sure everything was colored, you could color the inside of the card blue and green. But I think in this case, we don't need to do that. So instead, take the rubber cement and the bump outs and try to get as close to the edges as you can get. Especially where you just have a tiny bit here, you want to make sure that that actually does go and glue down. But be very careful not to go inside the bump out because you do not want to glue your bump out down. That would not be very good. Okay, so now we have our page. We have our inside page. Flap them a little bit and then just line them up right in the middle so that the bend is right there. And then just press it down. So here's the back top one of this. We'll do the same thing with this one. We want to stay away from the bump out, but glue on this edge and on that edge and on both those edges. A thin coat, no glopping, but make sure that you can see it. Flap it a little bit. Now this one I might have wanted to put something on the inside, but it's too late now, so I don't think it will matter that much. Okay, join the edges. Maybe when I decide what my book is going to be, I can color the inside somehow. So there we go, 2 bump outs, 2 different bump out pages. So that has been bump outs, and next week we usually do slides, and that is a hard one, so I'm going to have to try to figure out how I can do that over the internet. So I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have any questions, leave a comment and we will get back to you. All right, let's read one more book and you can see if you can tell which techniques we've used so far and where the bump. I think I used this as an example, but it's still got a good bump out. So, Max's Bad Hair Day by Kelly Wood. Max was a mutt of indeterminate breed. Life was fine until one day, and here's a flap that says dogs. His owner decided he was a poodle. I don't think Max looks much like a poodle. She took Max to Fifi's Flair, pet groomers with a mission. Max sat still while they cut and trimmed his mop of fur. When they were done, he was left bare and cold. And there's a talking mouth, and again, this one's bumped in at the tip, so it's slightly different. Oh, and here's our bump out. As soon as he was home, Max ran to check out his new cut in the mirror. His eyes grew wide with horror as he saw the foolish-looking dog reflected there. This is actually one of the bump outs that I like the most. Yipes, yelled Max. He looked ridiculous. Determined not to stay that way, Max crashed through a window. There he goes. And this is the slide, which we might, if I can figure it out, be doing next week. First, he dived headfirst into a mud puddle. There he goes. And next, he slogged through the worst burr bushes he could find. There's a flap. When Max was finished, he was a muddy mess from top to toe, but the horrible haircut was ruined. Max's owner had been so worried to find her broken window, she just gave Max a bath and recycled her dog breeds book. Max had never had a haircut again. And that's the end. So that was a pretty short one. Had everything in it that we do, and I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.